Welcome to the show No Instructions, where we meet with founders and interview them about starting and growing their businesses. I'm your host, Chad Ingram, 3-time founder and CEO at Distro. Distro is a platform to help businesses build teams by breaking down borders around the world. Let's go ahead and get started with today's guest and see how they built their business. All right, welcome to this episode of No Instructions. Today we have with us Mark Walker from SuccessFund. So thanks for coming.
Yeah, happy to be here, man. I'm excited.
Awesome. So we're excited to learn a little bit more about you. And, some guests I get to know pretty well prior to an episode, but I actually don't know you as well as some of the other guests that I've had. So this will be kind of interesting to learn more about you.
I know. I need to do this interview with you.
Yeah.
And then and ask you all these questions.
When I started the show, I actually screwed up because most podcasts, like you're supposed to do like an episode 0, which is like an introduction to the show and who you are as a host and stuff. And I never did that. And so I've joked with a few people like, I got to have you interview me on my own show.
That's right.
Yeah.
You go back and find whoever you interviewed with that you think would be the best host.
Yeah. See, that's the thing.
That would be trouble.
Who would be the best host, right?
So that's what it is. It's an audition.
Can I do maybe I should have me interview me. I'll write a list of questions.
That'd be fun.
That would be weird. For sure.
Nice.
All right. So tell us just real short and sweet, what is SuccessFund, like the problem that you're solving? Just to give everyone a little context of what you're doing today. We won't spend a lot of time there. We'll come back to that later in the episode.
Yeah. So SuccessFund is a platform that school districts use primarily for payment management, extracurricular transactions. We address the challenges that schools face with mishandling of funds and fraud. So a lot of schools will have faculty members that are taking payments in ways that they ought not to be.
Yeah.
Taking money into their personal Venmo accounts or collecting money and it goes missing. Mishandling of funds gets people into trouble.
We're just not knowing what's happening, right? Like you don't really know how,
Yeah. Well, we help.
It's disorganized.
Yeah. And so with the evolution of payments these days, the thought was as cash and check sort of goes the way of the world, that a lot of these skimming schemes and that stuff would go away. But it's been getting worse. And that's because we're all Venmoing each other.
Yeah.
We're sending money into each other's personal accounts and that money's getting lost and schools are having challenges with these new payment methods. So that's what we do. We help them kind of get current and modern in a way that works for the schools, what the community wants to use.
That's awesome. And your background was in product, right?
So mostly entrepreneurship. And we'll talk about my background a little bit. Yeah. But I was in the product organization at Adobe and strategy and all kinds of things.
Because you told me what you do in a very easy to understand way. And I was like, oh, that's a product thing.
Oh, yeah? Good.
You've done product interviews before.
It's funny because you talk to all these CEOs and founders and stuff, and they probably are good at product. They probably have to do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So hopefully I can articulate.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised at how many CEOs struggle to describe what they do. It's like they've hired people that do it better than them.
Yeah, that's true.
I guess we'll see. We'll test you on that a little bit later. But
nice.
So where does your story start? What if somebody wants to get to know you really well? Where does it start?
Yeah. Cool. So I grew up in Provo, Utah.
Okay.
Right. And I grew up with an older brother and a younger sister and a mom and a dad and basically your stereotypical family. Right.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because I've been listening to some of your episodes and listening to kind of some of the founders and things. And I love them, by the way. Great stories. Yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah.
And I loved hearing kind of the background and some of the things how they grew up and the values that they sort of, gleaned from their experience. And so I've been thinking about that prior to our conversation and thinking about what is it that was valued in my home. Because that, I think, shapes who I am and kind of the decisions that I make and why I do things. And so maybe just a little bit of insight into kind of my family. So I lived in a home where my mom and my dad both worked, right?
What did your dad do?
So my dad was a real estate appraiser.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then your mom?
And my mom was a mortgage loan officer.
They're both in the same kind of...
Same industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was really interesting because to me as a kid, my dad, and now it's like, well, an appraiser is a contractor, you hire him to do a job. But as a kid, it was like my dad owns his own business. Yeah. It was Walker Appraisal Services, that.
And was that always it though? Did he kind of the difference between self-employed contractor mentality versus like a business owner? Did he feel like, was it obvious to you as a kid that he kind of ran his own show?
Yeah. Well, it was kind of the way that we talked about things. Yeah. We talked about money at the dinner table. Mm-hmm. We talked about financial decisions and things at home because my mom, she did mortgages, the loan officer. Both of them worked in a way where you basically eat what you kill. Yeah. It was 100% commission. Both of them. Yeah. Both of them. And so it was like, we valued work. We knew that you had to earn what you got. Mm-hmm. And my mom being in mortgages, she would help people qualify for their loans and saw a breadth of mismanagement versus financial security and kind of wanted, I think, to help teach that to us.
That's an interesting perspective too, because when you're reviewing 5 files a day and the balance sheet on everyone is totally different.
Totally.
That's an interesting perspective to be able to see what you can do versus you almost get exposed to success no matter what doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, people who are really pressing the envelope and doing things that, buying the biggest house they possibly can when it might not be smart. Yeah. But, so we talked about that a lot. And it was kind of, in fact, growing up, I got paid for grades. My mom would pay us on a commission plan.
Was that your mom's idea or your dad?
I think my mom.
Okay, cool.
And it was like you get $1 or $2 for every A. But if you got all A's, you would double it. So A minuses count. If you got 4.0, you double that.
What if you didn't get good grades?
If you didn't?
Yeah.
And you didn't get paid.
Did you get in trouble?
No.
You just didn't get paid.
You didn't get paid.
This woman was logical. And she was really, really,
I don't know if
really
we got in
sharp
trouble
about it.
I'll be honest with you. I got good grades. And I don't know if it was because of the financial incentives that my mom set up. Yeah. Or just because there was, you be your best in everything you do. You got to be your best. That's what you do.
Yeah, who led that though? Was that was that energy more from your mom or your dad?
They were pretty good partnership.
Yeah.
I played basketball growing up. And my dad would take me shooting all the time at the church. We'd go to the church gym and we'd shoot. And I just remember you'd never leave on a miss. You always make your last shot before you go because it mattered how you finished. You know what I mean? Yeah. You always put your best foot forward when you start, but it mattered how you finish. So I can see that coming from my dad, but also same from my mom. So I think.
Okay, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So I was actually we were at this family event last week, week and a half ago for the 4th of July. I have an aunt and uncle that have this massive ranch up in Wyoming in Star Valley. Nice. And a bunch of family goes there and we're all hanging out late. And it's 11 p.m. at night. And one of my cousins is making homemade sourdough bread in this huge kitchen. It was a great time. Yeah. And all these teenagers file in. And we started this funny conversation about who's the more nurturing parent, versus the more rigid parent. Yeah. And who's the more, the parent you're more afraid of. And so we started asking all these teenagers their opinions about their parents. It was really funny. Yeah. So I'll ask you, who did you go to more often? If you needed help with something, who did you go to?
Yeah, this is a good question because where my mom and dad both worked, we grew up. They were home. Yeah. But it was not uncommon to come home from school and nobody was there, And so we learned to be independent. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean we didn't go to our parents for help or whatever. Yeah. My dad worked out of the basement. I remember we had an unfinished basement for years. And in the wintertime in Utah, snow outside, and his fingers are freezing cold, but his knees are burning because there's a little space heater under the Lifetime table. You know what I mean? On the cement. Yeah. And so I remember that. So he worked in the basement, so he was home. And so it's pretty easy to go downstairs and sit down and just be there quietly while he's working. He was pretty approachable. Yeah. And it's funny because I work from home now in the basement. And I'm I don't know if I'm as approachable. I'm sending my kids away constantly trying to be productive. So I appreciate that about him.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But yeah.
It's really, really cool. Okay. So back to what you're talking about, these things that you were learning from your parents, like, did you have like, and they talked about money over the table, right?
Yeah.
Dinner table. Did you like, what's the question I'm trying to ask? Did they have a mindset about money that was a little bit more scarce, or did they have a little bit more of an abundant mindset, around money?
This is a good question. And I haven't thought about scarcity mentality versus abundant mentality as far as my parents had. That's a good question. But I will tell you this, somebody, I don't remember which of them bought me, Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, when I was young, little. And I read through it and I was
by somebody, you mean your parents or some adult?
I think my mom or my dad somehow bought this book. Yeah. And so I read through it and I was like, oh, this is fascinating. And then I just kind of got really excited about those types of things. So I read like, Think and Grow Rich, and I read Dale Carnegie's like How to Win Friends and Influence People. I started getting into self-help books at a young age.
At 12.
Yeah, at like 12 and 13. I'm serious. Yeah. And it was not something that like a lot of 12-year-olds read or whatever, but I was just kind of influenced by that. So I don't know if those have scarcity or abundant mentalities in themselves, but I feel like that, along with like growing up in the 90s and looking at, you got John Stockton and Karl Malone. I played basketball. I watched those guys try to win the championship, playing against Michael Jordan, who was the best, and him saying things like, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And Nike saying, just do it. And like all of this happening, like it was just very, empowering as a kid, motivating.
Yeah.
And part of it too is that more than like scarcity versus abundant mentality, it was like, who are you? Mm-hmm. And are you being who you can become? Yeah. And growing up, we were really religious, right? Yeah. Obviously go to church every Sunday, pray in the morning and at night and over every meal and everything else. And we were walkers. Like the point I'm making is like, I was a part of something bigger than myself in a lot of areas.
And was that obvious to you at 12?
I don't think so.
Think that it came later?
I look back and realize that.
Okay.
But it changes the way you think about things, but the decisions that I make impact more than just me. And I want to live up to what I'm a part of. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like I'm a walker and we act a certain way, and that meant something to me.
Yeah, like a duty.
Yeah. But also like a potential. Mm-hmm. Like I could become something. And of course, religiously too, it was like, you're here for a reason. You have a purpose. There's a calling here for you. You need to discover it and you need to go and achieve it. So all those things kind of together make you feel like, for one, sometimes a little bit of pressure, but other times like there's a purpose here, and I feel most satisfied or fulfilled when I'm pursuing that. Yeah. Whatever it is.
Yeah. No, that's cool. And it makes a lot of sense. Like, but those things you start to learn and feel over time, right? So like, what was the next step for you? You said that in school you got pretty good grades, right?
Yeah.
School. Would you say that school came easy to you, or were the grades hard to achieve?
No, yeah, school came easy.
Okay.
But also I was competitive, and I had smart friends. Super smart friends that I don't like to admit were probably smarter than me, right? Because I'm competitive. And so I wanted to keep up. And I think that made a big difference. And I try to help my kids surround themselves with kids that are smarter and better and competitive too, so they can live up to it, right?
Right. It's good for them, right? Like
totally.
I remember when I started driving race cars and I entered into my first professional race, and there's multiple classes of the vehicle that I drive, and I could have easily competed and entered into the very kind of early stage driving class,
right?
And people more my fit, right, of seat time, and I entered into the top class, the professional factory driving classes, and everyone thought I was a little crazy for doing that, and so I remember why did you do that? You could have easily just done this other thing. You would have done better. You'll do better. And I said to them, if I don't drive against the best drivers, I won't be the best. I will never be as fast as them, and so why not start now?
Yeah.
So, I agree. It's the same mentality. I think putting yourself in a place that forces you to, see what is possible and achievable, or what scale looks like, it really, it sets you up to be able to do more, I think, naturally. It's almost a natural effect of it.
And I think that it was really, at least as a kid, achievement. That was really, there was a lot of praise, and I was probably a pleaser, and I looked for a lot of that. We played, I played varsity basketball. I was on the team for 4 years in high school.
How tall are you?
6'2".
Yeah, you were kind of tall.
A little
bit taller than me.
A little bit. My son is, he's hoping to be at least 6'2". He wants to beat me.
He wants to be at least, does he play basketball?
He plays basketball.
That's awesome.
Loves it. Yeah. And I remember wanting to win the championship. And I remember being told by one of my early coaches, you want to be in the championship game. But at halftime during the high school championship game, they bring out the academic all-state players. So all the players that, reached a certain academic level. You want to come out at halftime, and the best players are out there at halftime during the championship game wearing a jersey, because that means they're in the game and they made academic all-state. So you could do both. And so I did that. And that was
really awesome.
That was super cool. And
that was in Provo?
That was when I played for Provo High.
Yeah. You went to Provo High.
I went to Provo High.
It's gone now, I think, right?
Bulldogs.
They tore it down.
They sold it to BYU.
Or are they turning it in part of the campus?
And they rebuilt it west side of Provo.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Okay, so you do really well in school. Is it obvious what you're going to do next?
So...
after you graduate high school?
I mean, look, I figured that what you do is you start something and you make money doing it,
Okay.
Kind of looked at my dad and my mom. It's you go find a way to make money was kind of what you do, I guess, a little bit. And I read these books about that stuff. And, but as kids, we had cameras. We would video each other and make dumb movies and stuff. My friend had
an actual camera back then, right?
Yes.
We're talking a camcording,
like a camera that recorded on tapes.
Yeah. Far before a GoPro.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And my kids, all these kids have cameras in their pockets. I'm
right.
I would kill for that, but we had to pay a lot of money for those.
Yeah, for sure.
For cameras. And we would film stuff. And my buddy had a bootleg copy of Adobe Premiere, and we learned how to edit, and we made videos and stuff. And there was this moment where it was so fun. We had so much fun doing it. And one of my friends is we were this close to being dude perfect. I don't know how we missed that bow, but somehow the timing was off. But yeah, so I was we could probably do something to make money with our cameras and stuff. So I got with one of my buddies who enjoyed it and was let's do wedding videos. Interesting. Let's start a wedding video company.
So you're how old?
I was a sophomore in high school. So
great.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it was cool, let's do it. So we started doing it, and we charged $350 for a wedding video.
That's a lot to a teenager back then.
It was in it. Do you know how many lawns that is?
That's a lot of lawns.
To mow, for sure. That's what everybody else was doing. And so it was cool. We used probably, I don't even know how we would buy a copy of this software, but we downloaded it and used it. And I later worked for Adobe, so they got theirs back.
Yeah,
okay.
For sure.
Okay. And maybe that's why. But yeah, so we were doing this. We'd burn the CDs, and $350 a pop was just kind of whoa,
wow,
that worked. We did that, And so
How'd you get your first sales? Did you just ask some neighbors?
Oh yeah, just like any entrepreneur, man. Founders,
married.
It's all about friends and neighbors.
That's cool.
Totally, yeah. So I think the very first one was a neighbor, but $350 was actually cheap.
Yeah,
in those days, even we were the cheap end of the market, but for us that was good money.
Right.
And you could do it over a weekend and make $350. So we started doing that. That was kind of the first foray into.
What'd you do with the money?
We bought more stuff.
What were you like back then? Did you buy toys, or did you try and stash some money away?
No, we bought better cameras and microphones. And yeah.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. We were into it. And, we bought like inventory of DVDs and cases and like stuff. Awesome. And we got going for a little while there. And this was like me and my buddy. And this was my first sort of founder dispute of my life experience. Right?
You're in high school.
In high school, for sure. And so we had a fundamental sort of disagreement on what to do next. Cause I had read like the E-Myth Revisited, and I was like, oh, let's scale this up. Like, I know 3 other kids that like to do film. Let's get them. Let's go and like give them, these are the 19 shots you got to get. There's so many weddings that happen in Utah. Like we could do multiple every weekend, and then we could have these guys do the editing. And I was like, let's build a machine. That was kind of what I wanted to do, you know?
That's awesome.
And my friend was like, no, look, we can get really good at this. Like we can become the best, and we can charge $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 for these. People will fly us all over, and we can do high quality, wedding videos. Yeah. And I was like, we can't do both of these things.
It's true. They're very different.
And that was my first, like I was a teenager realizing like the path is,
So what'd you guys do? Did you guys break up?
Yeah. Totally.
Who broke up with who? You broke up with him?
Yeah, it wasn't.
Are you still friends today?
Not you, it's me. Oh, yes. Yes. And we split up, and I was like, look, I'm just going to focus on playing basketball. I'm done. But I had tasted blood. You know what I mean?
No, totally.
Like I had that experience of, whoa, you can create something from nothing and get paid more than you think you can. Mm-hmm. And that was just addicting. It was just like, wow, that was really cool.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's
That's
kind of
awesome.
Yeah. It was.
That's really awesome. Like it just, I don't know. And no one forced you to do that or said, hey, you should do this, right? Like you just kind of figured that out.
I mean, I try to think back, like I want to give credit where credit's due. Like I wonder if my mom said, hey, you should do this or something. Like
would it have been your mom or your dad though?
I think it would have been my mom.
Yeah. So it seemed like your mom was kind of like a super go-getter, huh?
She was.
Yeah.
Oh, she totally was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's still around?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. Both of your parents still alive?
Yep. Yeah. They both are.
That's cool. So they were proud, I imagine.
What's interesting is that so I have an older brother and a younger sister.
Okay.
My younger sister, she's an author, and she started an editing company. So she's got her own thing that she does. Yep. My brother went through chiropractic school, was a chiropractor, started his own practice, sold it. Now he and his wife have their own company. And I'm running SuccessFund. Like, we all kind of are doing the same thing. And I reflect back on like, I think a lot of this is what we valued in our home.
And like, I think sociology plays a lot into, what you saw. I mean, look at like your environment was eat what you kill. And that's all you saw. Right. Yep. And so you didn't really probably know this like job function and how that works, or it was just different. Right. So
it was different. Like we didn't have dad's going to work and he's coming back and a paycheck comes in. That's not really how it was. Like dad's working and he's making money. Like, or mom's working and she's going to make money. Like that's what they're doing. Right. And so it was like,
did you ever see a time when it was really hard? Like a time of famine?
So we did have that. But I was too young to realize it. I remember my parents put our house up for sale and I was little, and I remember people came walking through it, and we were excited that people were looking at our house. And so we'd give them a little tour and show them, this is this is that. Yeah. And I'm sure they didn't want us there when they were trying to buy our house, but
they probably didn't.
Probably not. But I didn't understand what exactly was happening there. But I think there were some tough times that I was shielded from.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think that in a weird way, I think it's like good for us to see that. So in my story, I saw, my dad was a small business owner as well, and I saw the feast and famine. Mm-hmm. And there were times when I would see it, and we all worked in the family business. And my dad was a caterer. And like, so if there was famine, we kind of knew we were part of it. Like we could see it, you know, to a certain extent, not the same way. And like, we'd be working off of a work order for like this big catering or wedding event. Right. And so we could see how much was being charged for what. So like, you could do the math on like, what was happening, at least as an early teenager. I remember that, and then I came back home right as the recession was starting in 2008. And I remember my dad like had almost no money, like at all. And how like scary that was. And I think that influenced a little bit of my story, whereas I was like focused on going and being a lawyer, working for a big law firm because, hey, I don't want any of this feast and famine.
Right. Get something secure.
Yeah, exactly. I need something secure. It's safe, right? And the truth is that's a fallacy. None of it's safe, you know?
Totally. It's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah. So I think, you know, I'm sure in some sense there was, I don't know, your parents probably did a good job at, you know.
Well, and my mom, and they talked about it. Like I said, like we talked about it and my mom would say like, and I don't know how much she talked about how much money she made or what, but it ebbed and flowed. You know, the market rates would go down, they would go up, and like housing market would shift here and there. And so she would explain like, yeah, it might be good now, but it might not be later. So you can't just blow it. You have to, you know, normalize the seasonality of life by being responsible with how you spend now. And so those were principles that.
Yeah. I mean, she was a mortgage lady, right? Like mortgages are by nature feast famine, right? Like it is that, you know, we have cycles of interest rates and low interest rates. It's a heyday, making tons of money, right? High interest rates.
Everything slows down.
Refinance.
You know? Everything slows down.
Yeah. And it gets kind of hard, but so what do you do after high school?
So I served in an LDS mission. So mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I served in Mexico.
Okay. What part of Mexico?
So 2 years. So Tijuana.
Oh, cool.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's not far from where I grew up. We used to drive into Tijuana to get tacos for lunch before the lines were crazy.
Oh, it's the best food in the world. Those Tijuana tacos are the best.
Now I would not recommend just going there leisurely. It's a little bit rough now.
No, it's rough.
Tijuana, anywhere near the border, just avoid it.
It was rough then too, but yeah, I just actually took a trip with my wife to New York and we got the tacos numero uno. Tijuana style tacos. I was like, finally.
Were they good?
Oh my gosh.
Oh, that's awesome.
Took me a trip to New York to find them again.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So good. Safer.
So what year were you in Mexico?
So 06 to 08.
Okay.
Yep. And I think about that experience too. You know, it was interesting. Like the people in Mexico, there's a lot of poverty. Obviously, there's parts of it that are just obviously third world country.
Was Ensenada in your mission?
It was.
How south? How south was your mission?
My mission went halfway down the peninsula.
Yeah. So I go to Baja fairly frequently to go off-roading down there.
Okay.
So
that was another mission.
Pretty well.
There's another mission down that far, but yeah.
So is San Quintin in the mission? Do you know?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
San Quintin. Yes.
We go there too.
No, I baptized Jesus in the ocean in San Quintin. Jesus.
a nice guy named Jesus.
Jesus. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, it's beautiful down there. The food's amazing. The tacos are amazing. I love it down there.
Yeah, it's the best.
It's still like one of the last frontiers if you go to Baja. Like there's places you go south enough in Baja and you're literally buying gasoline out of like a hand pump drum. Or there's like places with like no power and stuff. It's wild.
Yeah, but the thing is, like the people are so industrious.
Totally.
Like they'll be poor, but if you don't have money, what do? Like you're gonna go and like buy some flour or oil or something and make some tortillas and go door to door and sell them.
Yeah.
Like you're not gonna just sit there and die.
Yeah.
Like that's how the people were hardworking and industrious and creative.
Yeah.
And like a huge percentage of the population were entrepreneurs and founders of their taco shop or whatever they were doing. Yeah. And so that's the other thing. I was kind of surrounded by that for a while and just seeing like just the same reinforced like meritocracy.
Yeah.
If you do a good job, you'll be rewarded for it, but it's all about your effort.
Have you been back to visit Mexico?
So I went back shortly after. So I got home in October, went back and visited in February. Yeah. But I got to admit, when I went back, like I did not feel safe. It was weird, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But we found one of the taco stand guys that would give us free tacos when we were missionaries.
And he's like, yeah, you don't have a tie on anymore. No free tacos.
We bought all of this stuff, dude. I was like, yes, we'll pay you in US dollars.
That's really awesome.
So,
okay. So you come home for missions 2008. What happens and what do you do next?
Yeah. So I married my high school sweetheart pretty shortly after that.
She waited for you. So mostly. She led you to believe that she mostly waited for you.
That's right. Nailed it. That's exactly what it was. She's awesome and shares a lot of the same values that I have. Right. And so, and I think that marrying into her family sort of introduced some other things too. Her family really valued education and higher education and
jobs.
Yeah.
Higher education and jobs go hand in hand.
Yeah, they do. They do. And about the same time, that was good for me.
Yeah.
You know, and so my brother and I sort of around the same time became the first in our family to graduate college. And so I went to BYU for my undergrad. And I was mostly just going to school until I could figure out what startup I was going to do.
So was it always obvious to you that you were going to start a company?
I was doing it all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. I've seen that like a lot. Like, it's weird. Like in my story, I was literally about to go to law school. I was almost done with my undergrad. I hadn't quit yet. And I had already started and sold a small business in college.
Yeah.
And if you asked me what I did, I'd be like, oh, I'm going to go to law school. Like, I didn't even think about you know, that I had hustled and done this other thing that generated revenue, and then someone wanted to buy it from me.
Yeah, that's
cool. And I was like, yeah, for like a decent amount of money. To me back then, it was a lot amount of money. And I was
$350 a wedding video. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like, whoa, that's more than I thought.
Yeah, but it's funny though. It's like in you, you know, and you like, you can fight it all you want, or have an identity crisis about it too. But like, you know, if you're meant to be an entrepreneur, you're meant to be an entrepreneur.
So I was always starting stuff. I mean, all through school I was, and you know, it kind of helped me to get a lot more out of school because I would go to a class about product and learn something and be like, oh yeah, oh totally. And then go try it in real time.
So what about, go back to your wife's family. So they're about higher education. You go to school trying to figure out what you want to do.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, how is your wife's family helpful to you or their perspective?
It's just incredibly supportive for one.
Okay.
And she is too. I don't know how I would do any of it without that. That'd be hard. It's
much harder to be married to somebody and do this, like do what we do and not have a supportive spouse. It's almost impossible, honestly.
Yeah.
Or you'll end up divorced.
Yeah. I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is just rooted in a deep trust.
Yeah.
Like, I think she trusts that I won't do anything that would, you know, have a long-term impact that we wouldn't want. But at the same time, you know, it's funny because you also have to have the right perspective. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of founders are not taking massive risks. I really don't think that.
Yeah.
I think they're calculated. I think they're making decisions. And
you're talking about like entrepreneurs with businesses today doing,
people who leave their full-time job to start a company. This I did. I left Adobe to pursue my startup, and that does not feel like a risk to me. In this, you know, I mean, sure, it could go to zero, but I guess I could just go pick up another job.
Yeah. Right. That's the worst case scenario, right?
It's the worst case.
So yeah, like, and when you look at something I always look at it in a scale, like most things I do, I look at the best case scenario, which rarely happens.
Yep.
And I look at the worst case scenario, which also rarely happens.
Right.
And knowing that you find yourself somewhere in the middle, that's survivable, right? And that even the worst case scenario is often survivable. Right?
Oh yeah, it is.
Your worst case scenario, you got to go get another job. Does that mean that, you know, the sky is fallen? No, not necessarily.
No, I mean, you got your tail between your legs and you have to admit defeat, which nobody wants to do. And so you got a bruised ego. But ultimately, like, if you're doing this right, you've not lost your home, you've not lost your family, you've probably lost some years of savings that could have gone into a 401k. But I'm not sure that a 401k is how I'm going to do retirement anyway.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of different.
So, okay. So did you feel like you always had the support of, well, okay, we're going to get back to your wife in a minute.
Sure.
Before, I want to get to how we got to this point. So you come back from Mexico.
Yep.
Sign up for school. You get married. Marry into a cool family, it sounds like.
Super cool.
And they're like, hey, maybe you should consider getting a JOB. Yeah. You're like, oh, we'll talk about it later, you know, but right now I'm going to school, so they still like you.
Yeah.
And then
I got to interject on one thing. I went and asked my father-in-law, like, for his blessing to marry his daughter, right? And he said, what are you going to do for work? And I was like, And I was like, well, right now I am buying cars and selling them in Tijuana. Like, I'm not lying.
Literally.
Yeah. And he was like, okay. And I was like, yeah. And I'm thinking, and like, I look back at that and I'm like,
what did he do for work?
He works in management in assisted living.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Senior management role. Yep. And is great at what he does.
Yeah.
And successful and everything.
Yeah.
But the fact that he's like, yeah, you can marry my daughter and that's your plan is crazy to me. So I think he's smart too. Wise guy. And not a wise guy, but a wise person.
Yeah.
And he probably looked at me and went, okay, he'll figure it out.
Yeah.
You know?
See, that's the good thing, right? Is like whatever you're doing today is going to be different later, right? It's just all kind of one step at a time.
And my daughter will straighten him out.
Yeah.
That's the other thing too. She influences a lot of the decisions that we make.
That's great.
We decide together.
And is she generally afraid or less afraid?
When she gets afraid, she just wants to let me handle it.
Okay.
And she just trusts.
That works.
Yeah.
That can work. So out of college, what do you get your first job somewhere?
Yeah. So while I was in college, I started working with my mom on mortgages.
Oh, okay.
It's easy. And it was 100% commission. So it was very flexible to be able to work when I had time to work. And you could make decent money doing it. And so I started doing some of that and starting different things all along the way on the side as well. So I did that during undergrad. I entered Boom Startup. You're familiar with Boom Startup? I did one of they're an accelerator program here, local accelerator, incubator type thing. Yeah. And so I did one of their early years, early chapters of that. And that sank, that company.
What were you studying in school? Like, what was your focus?
Entrepreneurship.
Okay.
I mean, I got there and I was like, well, what can I do? And they have this. And I'm like, oh, that seems like what I want to do.
That sounds great.
That sounds great.
We'll pick that one.
Yeah. And then I could get credit for my classes for what I'm already doing.
Yeah.
Or trying to do,
Okay.
So
you're doing mortgages and then
I graduated undergrad and I was doing mortgages. I didn't like doing it. I didn't want to keep doing, this is not what I wanted to do. And so I reached out to Kickstart Seed Fund, actually, Gavin and those guys over there, interviewed with them. And I also applied for the MBA program, influenced by my wife and her family, I think. I look back and it's like, well, baby, if you don't know what you're going to do.
What made you want to go interview at a VC? Did you even know about the tech community back then? So
when you do entrepreneurship, a lot of it, honestly, the college degree, a lot of it is playing house, if I'm being honest. It's like, what are entity structures like? How do you raise money? Who do you raise money from? What do rounds look like? How does it, so you just learn the mechanics. You learned
a lot of that in the program.
Tons of that in the program. But all of that. They teach
you how to go sell something in the program?
I mean, I
wish they would do that.
I think they talked about it. Yeah. And so I call it playing house because you can learn the mechanics of it, but until you create something that people want and that will pay for,
right? You
haven't done anything. All you're doing is setting up an entity and whatever.
That's exactly right.
So because of that, I was pretty familiar with VC, and I had while I was at doing mortgages, I knew that Kickstart was teaching a class at BYU, and I already graduated. But I was like, hey, can I come and just audit and sit in? So I participated. They do diligence in that class. They have the students go do diligence on some investments. So I did that. And I showed them that I knew what I was doing. And then I asked them for a job.
And how'd that go? They said no?
No, they said, we can pay you a stipend and you can be an intern until we have a role for you.
Okay.
Basically. But my idea was I want to go and see, they basically buy the market and I wanted to jump into a portfolio company. That's what I was thinking.
Okay.
And then I also, because I didn't know how that was going to go, I also applied for the BYU MBA program. I took the GMAT, I signed up for it and took it in 2 days and applied late. But they had a down application year or something because I got accepted. In fact, I interviewed and was told, no, you don't have enough job experience. Your GMAT's not quite there. It's fine, but it's not quite there. You come back in a couple of years. And I was just like, but if this is where I want to be and where I feel like I ought to be, why would I wait to do that? Don't tell me no. And finally I got the interviewer to say, fine, interview with someone else, but I'm not going to say yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And that worked out?
Yeah, I went to my next interview. Old guy in the career center placement, basically was interviewing to see if I could get a job because that's what they care about. Coming out of the MBA, can you get a job?
Right.
And this guy came out, Derek, and I went in. And the guy that I interviewed with, older guy, was like, "Do you know who that was?" I was like, "Oh, no, that was Derek." And Derek owns a donut shop, and man, it's so cool. And it's called Cowboy Donuts, and they do this and this. And I was like, cool.
He owns Cowboy Donuts?
Yeah.
That's cool.
And I was like, oh, cool. And we talked about Derek for like 30 minutes. And then at the end, he was like, okay, we'll get you in. Wow. And I was like, sweet. And I walked out. I was like, I think he thinks I'm Derek. I don't know. But I didn't. I got accepted, right? Yeah. And that's all that mattered because I could hustle through any of the rest of it.
Okay.
I could figure it out. So I got accepted to BYU MBA program, and that was incredible. I mean, I would recommend that to anybody. The full-time program was awesome. Yeah. And I met all kinds of incredible people. In fact, one of my friends from that is how we got introduced.
Yeah.
So
was that through Shane?
Zach.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Zach Oates. He's got an episode with me really early on.
I need to listen to his.
You should listen to it. It's really good. It's really good. I think he was number 2 or 3.
Yeah. His New Jersey background, does he talk about that?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay,
and man, those early episodes, I feel like I should redo them with some of those guys because they have such a cool story.
Yeah.
And I hope that we told it well enough, Yeah. So, but yeah. Okay. So you go through the MBA program, and by the way, just a comment, you have a lot of education for somebody who was obviously going to start a company. Yeah.
So the thing is like, I needed to find my team and I needed to find the right thing, and I wasn't finding it. And so like school was a way to just try to find it.
Okay.
Weirdly.
Well, what's funny is I've been very critical to students who find themselves in school avoiding the thing they actually need to do, which is to go start something and learn, right? Because you learn very fast in that environment. It's a real sandbox, right?
Yeah.
Going out and building something. And the first company you build is always going to be a disaster, right? Like, so it's, it's rare for the first thing to work out to be like amazing, right? And it morphs and changes along the way and all that. And so I think for a lot of people, just like getting started and playing with things and toying around and figuring it out how it all works, it's the best thing they could do anyway, right?
Yeah.
And so like for you, you'd been doing that the whole time.
Yes, I have so many tombstones of failures.
Exactly.
Totally.
Yeah, and they're not all like massive failures. You generated revenue. You had this idea. You maybe had
you get a little further every time.
Right, exactly.
Like you kind of get a little further every time, and then, yeah, that's exactly my experience.
Yeah, it's just like, your mom, right? Her first mortgage was a lot slower than her last mortgage, right?
I'm sure.
And your dad's first appraisal was probably a mess compared to his last appraisal, right? So the craft that we have, I think, and hope, it gets better over time. So, okay, how do you end up at Adobe after your MBA?
So I remember having a conversation with my original friend that we did wedding videos with, and I called him, and I felt a little bit like I was admitting defeat going back to school. Because he knew, I mean, he's incredible. And he just had his first Super Bowl commercial air this last Super Bowl.
Really? So he's been doing videography.
He did it. Wow. And he's incredible.
He was right.
He was right.
Build the hardcore video, right?
Like, and he told me one time, like, never tell anybody that I did wedding videos because that's not a background that's respected in this environment. So don't do that. But he was the youngest to do so many different things. He's incredible. So he went and did that. And I remember talking to him and being like, yeah, I'm going back to school and I'll probably just go and get a job at like an Adobe or something while I'm looking for my next startup. I remember telling him that. So I went through school and it was the first time I'd ever like recruited for a job. But it was such a good experience to see what that was all like. I didn't get an interview with Adobe early on, but I hustled to go. Like I didn't get the first interview, and so I went to the Career Center. There's a bunch of students working there, and I wanted to work at a company like Adobe, and I was like, "Hey guys, I need like the recruiter's contact information," which I don't think they're supposed to give you. He was like, oh, and I just walked around and I was like, yeah, can you pull it up? And like he gave me, and I emailed him and I was like, hey, I didn't get an interview for the MBA, like interviews you're doing, but are you coming to campus or how can I do it? And he said, well, we're doing undergrad interviews, so you can come and see me there. So when he came, I went and saw him and I was like interviewed with him and stuff. And I was talking to everybody.
This was in person at the office?
Down at one of the buildings at BYU.
Yeah. Oh, got it.
BYU he came. In any case, I ended up getting an interview interviewing with him with the undergrads, which was not, I don't know.
You were overqualified at this point, right? You had an MBA.
Yeah, but on paper, I didn't have the background or anything that a lot of these other guys have. And so I didn't get an interview, but I did interview with him with the undergrads. And then they asked around to some of the other Adobe people that I had spoken with, who should we bring to the second round? And because I had been hustling, they were like, oh, Mark's good. And so I got an interview there.
Okay. So, and what role were you trying to go after?
It didn't matter.
Really?
It didn't matter.
You're like, I will get your coffee. I will go get your Red Bulls. I almost took accounting, marketing, whatever you want.
Yeah, I almost took like an SDR role, which I would have not loved probably, but luckily I didn't. But yeah, it was a strategy type role. I could, anyway. So I that role, my boss there was fantastic, who hired me over there, and I just basically had to learn to code SQL and data query stuff, and we ended up being in like computational management. So we did a whole bunch of, was involved in all kinds of different stuff while I was at Adobe. But again, I was there looking for my startup, what I was going to do.
Did you feel like, so you were there how many years?
6.
Okay. That's a long time for a millennial.
I wanted to do 5, but
okay. Well, tell me, so that's kind of what I'm getting at. It's like aside from just enjoying the work you were doing, how did you feel like with your own like personal purpose? Like did you feel any conflict with like, oh, I got to go to work today, but really I need to go build a business? Did you feel that at all, or were you okay and patient with where you were?
Yeah. Well, I started side hustles while I was at Adobe because they allow for that, right? You disclose it. You tell them I'm working on this on the nights and weekends. And I did a few of those, but ultimately you do that until it pulls you away. You can't leave and then pretend you're going to take something from nothing. But if you do a side hustle for a while and then it gets big enough, then you can leave and you're not taking risk, right?
Yep. That's how it almost always should go.
Yeah. And I was surprised when I did leave, how many people reached out and said, you're doing exactly what I'm trying to do, what I want to do. You're living what I want to be doing. And that was validating.
Yeah.
But your question is, was there a conflict there that I wasn't kind of aligned to who I was?
Yeah.
And I think ultimately, we are all trying to align to who we are and who we can become. But I don't think we know the steps that are required to get there until we're kind of doing them. Mm-hmm. I learned so many things while I was at Adobe just about how an organization is structured, what a sales organization ought to look like, so many things like that, right. Hiring, managing, all of that stuff that I would not have experienced if I had just tried starting from nothing. I almost wonder how, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world can do that without having seen and experienced what it's like in a big company. Some things you don't want to repeat and you don't want to do, but you learn a lot of how things work.
So how did you arrive at solving the problem with SuccessFund? Like, how did you see that problem and how did you think I could solve it?
Yeah, primarily I wanted to pay for my kid's field trip with a donation and the teacher wouldn't take my Venmo payment.
It was literally that simple.
I mean, yeah. And Adobe would match my donation and no one could figure out how to do it. And I was like, you want me to come to the school with a check? What? So that's how it started. And it kind of went up from there. And we just kind of discovered a massive additional problems that existed. So
yeah. And it's like, I mean, when you go to your wife though, like you tell her, hey, I got this idea. I want to go start this company, sending money to school districts. Was she like, No, you're crazy.
It's more like this. Hey, this is something that we've been trying. I'm trying this for a while. Do you think that's interesting or whatever? And going and then saying, hey, we've made a lot of progress on this. I think I'm going to quit my job and we're going to have no salary for 18 months.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I think this is going to work. There's enough evidence that it's going to work.
And she's like, I think I still love you. So go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She basically is asking, she didn't ask because she's just very trusting, but it's like, let's talk about what changes this means for our lifestyle.
Right.
And to me, it was important that there weren't any. And we could go for a long time living how we live. And she's frugal and we're judicious about our decisions and financially smart. And so we did. I went 18 months with no salary and then a long time with a very small salary.
And were you able to fund kind of the early stages with yourself?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you didn't go to investors, right?
We have no funding other than customer funded.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. So you either started in a great time, which is like after the tech sort of crash a couple years ago, or the worst time. And as it matures, we'll see.
Yeah.
How right you were. Same thing for me in distro. But what are next steps for you and the company? I mean, you have traction now. You guys have good revenue and stuff.
It's really fun to grow. I mean, it's really, really fun and it's validating.
Yeah.
And so we're doubling again in August, and just, it's really, really cool to see that. And then also to kind of look at, okay, well, we make money on the transactions. So we have transaction revenue, but we're introducing subscription revenue, which is not something that's a new muscle for us. So we're doing that. And we're looking at opportunities that exist to grow beyond just more customers.
How many employees do you guys have now?
We're very small. In fact, we're smaller now than we were last year.
Yeah, but self-funded.
Self-funded.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really awesome. So what are the next steps for you and the company?
Honestly, right now, we want to get to the point where everybody, I listened to this other podcast I like about bootstrappers.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of bootstrapper content, to be honest.
Well, it just doesn't sound as sexy to people.
Right. Maybe that's it.
Bootstrappers are also busy working. They're not out fundraising.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's right. And there was one I was listening to, and gosh, it was really cool to hear the founder who does revenue distributions at the end of the year. And really, to me, it's maximizing that. I'm just constantly shocked at what we can accomplish with so few people.
Yep.
Our team is so small, but we're so efficient and so effective. And with AI and with everything else, the stuff that we can accomplish, just us, is crazy. I think our customers think that our company is so much bigger than it is because we're supporting them.
Yeah, totally.
And they're big.
It's awesome.
So that's it.
Well, that's really awesome. I'm sure you guys will continue to do really well. So if anyone has any questions for you, they want to learn more or, have a conversation with you, what's a way they can reach you?
Yeah. Come find me on LinkedIn. Here's the thing. My customers are not on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And so that's tough. But all of my friends and people that we want to bring into the team and like all of that is, so reach out to me on LinkedIn. Yeah. Mark Walker. I'm excited to connect with anybody, and especially bootstrappers, those guys who are in that stage of like, we haven't raised money, but we're doing this our own way. Oh gosh, I would love to kind of hear some of what they do.
Definitely. Well, thanks for taking the time to come on the show.
Thank you, man. It's really fun.
Cool. Thank you for listening to today's episode of No Instructions. Feel free to leave us a rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe so we can continue producing these podcasts. Today's episode was brought to you by Distro. Distro is a platform to help startups find, hire, and pay employees in over 200 countries. It's free to use. Go to distro.io to set up your free account today.